What I'm going to do, I represent the All Ireland Smart City Forum, which will explain an organisation or a group or a community of practice, as I'll explain. It's been going for 4.5 years. But while I don't work for cities, what I'm going to do for the next few minutes is try to explain from their point of view some of the challenges which they're trying to overcome. In your invite to hear, I think that's what you were led to believe, that you would be told about the significant issues in the area of smart cities. And I'd gladly take any questions as we go along. The Smart City Forum is we call it a community of practice. It involves all the cities on the island of Ireland. There's 4 local authorities in Dublin, so in total there are 11 local authorities who get together once every 6 weeks and essentially have kind of it started off by having a cup of tea, saying what are you doing, what are we doing, and learning off each other. They're all very much on a journey, but at different parts of the journey. I know you're going to be told, Alan isn't here as yet that I know of, but you're going to be told of one specific project down in the Docklands, I presume in Smart Dublin and the Dublin Docklands project. But that's one of the oldest smart city initiatives in Ireland, and it's 4 years old. Well, cities like Galway, Newry, Waterford are at the very, very start of their journey. So we get together, and that's what it is. We talk about the issues of the day as time has gone on. A few years ago it was all about public Wi-Fi. It's always about procurement. Public procurement never ends as an issue. More and more we're getting into how we might collaborate. We have, I suppose, exploited the Enterprise Ireland Smart, the SBIR, which is Small Business Innovation Research Funding, which allows local authorities to set challenges. And you might have seen in the Dublin area things like cycling safety being advertised and challenges put up and people coming in with solutions. But there's been about 15 or so, a few million euro invested in that in the last while. So we have a national conference. We've just had our 3rd national conference. So it's where the cities who are not necessarily technical people. In fact, most of the people who are involved in smart cities in this country are based in economic development. So they don't necessarily have a technical background. And it is their kind of remit to advance this agenda. Okay, up first I get the chance to talk about what is smart cities. And this is a typical diagram, and this is obviously a Dublin one, drafted by Smart Dublin, which you'll hear about in a little while. But what does it have? It has, real-time passenger smart bins, bike share, smart energy, smart cameras, and these are kind of typical images that we all see and understand by what a smart city is. But what I really want to emphasize on top of that, the notion of smart city it certainly is a data-driven concept, a concept enabled by data technology. But really at the heart of it is social cohesion, social inclusion, and cities striving for sustainability. So social sustainability and environmental sustainability. And it's those two pillars. There's technology on the one side, but there's this equally strong pillar that we cannot forget, is this social, the connection with the citizen, the engagement with citizens, and that they're part of the journey as well. And from cities, cities do, and they have good protocols, and they have a long history of engaging, but in this kind of new environment, it is one of the big issues that they have to overcome, and which they are making great strides in doing so. First. But when we think of smart cities, internationally, two cities tend to come out in the top 2, if not the top 3, and they'd be Amsterdam and Barcelona. And the guy, our good friend from Amsterdam, puts up a similar slide every time he presents on the subject. And he talks about the innovation graveyard. And really the point, and I'm trying to sort of restate that this is, from a city point of view, and all this new technology, which I'm going to explain a little bit more on how they deal with it, but it's been a journey, and it's been a very rocky journey, and continues to be a very rocky journey. There's an assumption and this is where I'm coming from, there's an assumption that cities must and cities know, cities have knowledge. Well, they don't necessarily. This is all as new to them as it is to you or I. As I said, 4 years ago, the first cities in Ireland, and the two primary ones would be Dublin City Council and Limerick. And they were the leaders in it. But they're far in advance of anybody else. Belfast, which is, in relative terms on this island, a very wealthy city. I mean, 2 years ago they said, like, don't come near us. You know, we don't even know we don't know what this is all about. Give us a few months to think about it. So it's been a rocky road, and there is an assumption that that cities have all this knowledge, and they don't. And they're going along a journey, and they're trying to figure it out as they go along as well. What I have here is two diagrams, and it might explain it a little bit more. On the left is a kind of, when I say LA, I mean local authority. And for 20 years in information systems, we've been struggling with and continue to struggle with the relationship between IT and business. I looked up, just I knew, I know there's a Scottish representative here today, so I didn't want to use an Irish or a UK example. So I looked up what would be a good city website. So I looked up Boston this morning, and I can get my license, I can get my parking tickets, and I can get information, or I can apply online for things like that. So what's been happening in the last 20 years is a strive for efficiency and the link between IT and business to provide the services to citizens. And at this stage that has evolved, and it tends to be an e-government type scenario where you have where you can do most things online. And this has been what we've been trying to do here, is build structures, build processes, and build relationships between IT and business. But along comes the smart city, and we have a system. We have a diagram to the right, which is much more complex. And really, it's complex because of three things. In the first instance, technology has moved on. During all of this, and it continues to be the case, the assumption is that technology follows strategy. Technology enables strategy. So when you're trying to get an alignment between your IT and your business, it's, do your information systems support your business strategy? It is primarily an efficiency drive. But nowadays with the technologies, and I'm sure, I can imagine before the end of the day, a lot of people will talk about platforms, which would be a good example. But strategy, to some extent now, is technology is beginning to dictate strategy. And that would be the first big change. The second big change, and while this is not a smart city phenomenon, I think smart city is just an example, is that this is an internal focus, a very, very strong internal focus, such as the Boston example. It's all about, just digitalization of services. But now we have a situation where, and you're going to be told later on about, I'm sure, about the docklands, when you have an ecosystem of technology service providers who the expectation is that the city is at the fulcrum of this large ecosystem, and they need to be able to manage it. So you have this new technology, unknown, and you have a complication of ecosystems. And so what have people done around the world, and including Ireland, is they've created a new structure. They've created a smart city program office. So what I have here is, instead of this simple dyad relationship, you have this three-way relationship, which makes the governance, makes the understanding, the alignment all that more complicated. And this is what cities are trying to, they're thrown into the middle. They're trying to understand what this is and how to manage it. And to a large extent, they're doing well. But I'm trying to get across that, there's some cities that are still here, and they're moving quickly to there. And it's and I suppose if I ever get frustrated when I talk about when you're in conferences and you hear cities must, of course cities must, but they must know first, and they're learning, and that's kind of the journey that they're involved in. So what is happening? This is for the academics in the room, sensing, seasoning, and transforming is a kind of typical dynamic capabilities diagram. But really, they're building competency. They're building competency in being able, and it's not, well, I've put it in a linear motion, in a linear fashion, because to sense technology, to season, and actually to use it sounds like it's in a sequential, but that's not actually what's happened. It happens any time. But essentially, what their cities are trying to do is to understand what the market has to offer. Secondly, they're trying to take that on board, bring it in-house, have the protocols, the processes to bring it, and then actually use it and exploit it. Some cities, Dublin City Council, are a great example of understanding sensing. And if they were here, if the main person were here, he wouldn't mind me saying that they're not so good at the other two. Limerick was mentioned before, fantastic, and because of their culture of project management and being able to to bring things in board. But again, it's very unbalanced. So these over time are trying to develop competencies to sense, to season, and to transform. So what are they doing about it? The first thing that they've done is there's a very strong relationship with commercial research and other public bodies. And that's evident, and you're going to hear more about that today, and I suppose I'm part of that too. Focusing through districts, that's must have been a technique or a tactic worldwide where if you concentrate effort and get momentum, you can get support internally and externally. You can get people to buy in. So, I mean, most cities, if they haven't already, they're on their way to developing some kind of districts or some kind of quarter where they can concentrate their effort. At this stage, it's taken 3 or 4 years, but now the stakeholder engagement is very, very strong, or continuing to be strong. So most cities will go out, talk to the stakeholders, citizens, commercial, public bodies, and they're doing this process and typically trying to use a kind of a challenge structure by identifying problems and then putting those issues back out with the hope that people might be able to provide solutions. They're more and more collaborating, typically through the SBIR, and I know you'll hear a little bit more about that, and I'll name a few of those in a moment. That's an Enterprise Ireland fund, which for public bodies, which allows public bodies to issue challenges to the market, and people are allowed. It's a pre-procurement, so it allows people and gives people the opportunity to build and be funded on prototypes and proof of concepts. And at this point in time now, they're beginning to integrate this kind of activity into their overall strategies. It's not linear, as I say. Some cities are at a very early stage, some are more advanced, some would admit they haven't even started. And then ultimately what they're trying to do is become a voice, be able to get to be a lobbyist, to be able to influence national agendas and to be more goal orientated, have larger projects, and I think an example of that would be the Limerick energy focus at the moment, where they have through H2020 they are going to understand energy consumption in Old Georgian Quarter and build on top of that energy production in the city, which will be an interesting project in a couple of years' time. So essentially, that's what they're trying to achieve, and that's how they've gone about doing it. These are just some examples in smart districts. Belfast have along the Titanic Way, Waterford have a cultural quarter. You'll hear about Dublin Docklands. Smart Sandyford is a business-driven one. Limerick have their Georgian Quarter. Cork have started up a learning neighbourhood. So these kind of efforts are fairly common. Citizen engagement, Cork have gone out and spoken to a fair sample of Cork citizens to understand what they believe, what their perceptions of smart cities. Fingal are the top of the pops in terms of interaction with citizens. So these are the type of projects that they're trying to do to live up to that value system. Open data it'll probably come up more and more in the afternoon. every city in this country is trying to understand and develop and provide data developed internally and provide it to anybody who really wants to do it. But it is the hardest time-consuming. But Dublin have a good dashboard, and probably most cities at this stage, Derry, Dundalk, Cork, Limerick, all have dashboards where you and I, if we so wish, can go and access publicly derived data and use that for our own purposes. The most common, in sustainable mobility is a huge focus. We have, you may hear later on about collaborations between local authorities on last mile delivery. That's to do with to overcome congestions in cities. Workplace mobility, autonomous vehicle demos, as per the diagram you might have seen last year. So these are just examples of what they're doing. Urban places, right? Okay. Environmental practices, monitoring bathing water, the energy in Limerick. Smart bins are all over the place. You're probably aware of when you walk by bins that they are essentially IoT devices, and they have the ability then provide monitoring, environmental monitoring, air, waste and soil and noise, etc. And then essentially this is us, the Smart Cities Ireland. So I just represent that group, and we are a kind of just we allow a conversation between the cities so that they can learn from each other. Thank you.